Welcome. I'm Stephen Garvey with National Citizens Alliance. I have Philip Hutchings with me,
Hello.
and you heard his dog in the background. But
Oh, sorry.
we're gonna talk about manufacturing today. We're gonna go through the hard facts on it, and and this is going to be looking at imports, exports, looking at the manufacturing as percentage of GDP. We're going to look at outsourcing and just give you an idea of what's happening in terms of manufacturing. Obviously, Canadian manufacturing is something NCA wholeheartedly supports. It creates jobs, value-added goods, and it's great for the economy. But the hard reality is that we're losing our manufacturing every single month, every single year, and it's been going on for decades. And this outsourcing, just so people know what it is, and in layman's terms, that's literally taking your job here, national job, and sending it over to someone, an overseas employee. So you're basically losing your jobs. That's what outsourcing is, and that's what happens with the Canadian manufacturing too. Um, it's a very Philip. It's a very uh, precarious state we're in here when we look at the federal debt. We factor in the manufacturing. And as you said, we were discussing earlier this week, the Canadian economy is basically service and resources, Philip. Uh, yeah,
Sorry. That is
yeah,
true in a large regard. I mean, we do have manufacturing here in Canada. Obviously, there are still a fairly large manufacturing base, but we have shifted from what was previously in the 50s, 60s, and 70s a large industrial and booming and expanding industrial nation into one that is really providing more of our raw resources to the world, providing raw farm products, raw minerals, unprocessed wood, oil, etc. Um, it isn't a way to enrich a nation. We're providing the raw resources at a low cost to other nations, which are then reselling them back to us.
as finished products.
Yes, it's
Yeah, yeah,
reminiscent of high school history when they talked about the mercantile system and
yeah,
where.
and yeah,
Go ahead.
excellent stuff. So we will get into that. I just want to mention to everyone that some of these, I'm sorry, I call them cabal puppet politicians in Ottawa. I'm going to be very blunt with you, but some of them have been mouthing, "Oh, let's let's get manufacturing to 100%, Philip." You
Wow.
know, and at NCA, that is an absolute absurd, um, ignorant statement, or it's actually manipulative of the Canadian public, right? So
Yes.
we would love more manufacturing, but the reality is that we're going away from it, and we're going to explain why. But to actually have 100% manufacturing in Canada, we would basically have to be like China, a communist state with wages like $1 an hour, minimum benefits, right, Philip?
Absolutely. How
So
would any products be
is that what
produced?
they're proposing? We turn into this, top down. It's already top down governance, but a communist one party state like China. Is that what they want?
Well, imagine the 5-year transition to a nation that produces a certain amount of its products or a certain percentage of its goods. But if we shift to, say a law down the hammer where everything must be 100% Canadian, which I think wouldn't really be done in the near future, would result in us not being able to source raw materials, would result in the not being able to source secondary products that are produced on other products that would otherwise be produced, and trickle down the stream. You would run out of the ability to produce goods. There would be a shortage of everything. Supplies would essentially run, and there would be a cost of goods would just run skyrocketing. It would be a disaster.
Yeah, but hold on a sec. I was looking at another
Yeah.
scenario, Philip, where they actually push our wages down
Yes.
and they eliminate most of our benefits,
Hmm.
right? And that's another scenario. That's a disaster for the working Canadian, isn't it?
Yes, and the easier way to do that and make the pill to swallow is through inflation to, by reference, make your wages worth less. So instead of reducing your $15 an hour minimum wage or $20 an hour wage, whatever it is, down to $10 or $7.50, they can instead make your dollars effectively worth less. So if you go back and you hear your grandparents talk about candy being 5 cents or a penny at the convenience store, well, you look back at what it cost if you're 20 or 30 or 40 years old when Mars bars were 80 grams and 45 cents or 50 cents, and now they're 45 grams and $1.55. Well, you're getting less chocolate bar today for more money and more labor hours. So you actually have lost. And it's a problem where really when you're pressing wages and people say, hey, I'm not getting ahead anymore. My wages are effectively running where I'm running faster and faster on the wheel, but not getting any further ahead. That's why. And so you are reducing wages. And
That's
it's just,
one of the reasons.
yes.
No, taxation is another one.
Oh, for
But
sure.
inflation is huge. But we're not going to get into this today. But inflation is directly linked to the monetary policy, money creation. Everyone needs to understand that, and the money creation has been unbelievable in this country, especially since 1971. It's been ramping up, but
Mm,
we'll do another segment on that. But that's very concerning. I want to turn to this graph now.
sure.
So what's really disturbing is you can't get data. Like this is from 1970. Where is it here? 19 It's 1997 to 2021. I want to get data prior to that, Philip, but I can't find it anywhere. But if you just look at this graph alone, Canada GDP from manufacturing, you can see the trend line is down, Philip. But we see the crash in
For sure.
2008, the crash, the COVID crash in 2020, but still the trajectory is down here
Yes.
overall. If you start from let's say from the year 2000, right? You see that line there.
Hmm.
If you do a trend line, it's trending down, and that's consistent with our other data. But I want people to be very cautious of this government data. Um, I know there's a person in the U.S. They've done great research on the GDP, Philip, and it's been
Hmm.
corrupted. So it's the central banks at it again. They're um, they're making it look more than it really is. They're manipulating the data, how they're calculating it, and that's the same with inflation, CPI.
Well,
So
it's the
they're
same as the
projecting.
price of goods. The price of goods,
Yes,
Stephen, have
yeah,
risen exceptionally. Just looking at that graph to the side, agricultural goods have risen astronomically in the last year globally. From what I've heard in reports, that the cost of corn, etc., has and rice has
yes.
risen. So cost of lumber has exceedingly risen. Um, these things potentially are market manipulations to um, modify and adjust GDP. It's just my own speculation, but
This is a good graph here. I'm going to
yeah.
turn to this, Philip. Manufacturing value added, which is critical
Hmm.
for creating national wealth, percentage of GDP. And here you can see the decline of what's going on in the country. Look at this. But again, I can't. The data only goes to 1997. Like I'd love to see it going back another 50 years, Philip.
Hmm.
But look at this decline, steady decline.
Yes.
On the liberals were in power here. Then the Harper regime, the Trudeau regime. Look at it, just steady decline there. That gives you an idea of what's happening.
Yes. I mean,
It's very bad.
yeah. I mean, I can't speak for other regions, but if anyone living in southern Ontario has driven in the area of Hamilton through down to the Niagara region, they can definitely attest that there are a large number of empty, barren properties or empty factories or factories that are producing at a much smaller scale than there existed 20 years ago. And it's dramatic. There's large hardship in that region.
Yeah, I'm going to turn now to imports, exports, because that's related to the manufacturing. So it's important that we have an idea of what's going on with that. And I'm going to start with exports. And here's the graph here. And since 2012, there's been an increase in export, but you could argue, Philip, this is not manufacturing. These are the raw resources that you were talking about that are flowing out of the country,
It's tough unless you see an
right?
individual breakdown. It's
But
tough
we
to know
know, but
specifically.
no, no, but hold on a sec. But we know from the value added is declining, right?
Hmm.
So we're going to assume a lot of this is raw resources, right? Lumber, uh, oil, gas, etc. Right?
Yes, and I mean it includes money supply, whatever specifically is covered under trade. So I mean, there's a lot of ways to manipulate this data, pro and con, in order to get a positive result. Especially when they included the provision of labor
Yeah. What's
in
really
the GDP.
frustrating, Vince, is the data. Like you can only go to 1997 on this.
Yes.
So, but keep the number in mind. I'm going to go back to it here. Um,
Yeah. But I mean, the
so
other
we're
important column there too, Stephen, is we're looking at a curve. What that doesn't really match up with well is the population increase in Canada over the same time from the 1974.
Yeah,
The Canadian population at that time was, I'd have to look it up, but I'm going to guess somewhere around 13 to 14 million people.
yeah. Here's the
Um,
data here, but
so,
I just want to keep people this in mind when we look at imports. Exports from Canada decreased 1.6%, to a 5-month low of 49.5 billion. Philip.
wow.
Okay, so I'm going to turn towards so we can look at that because that gives us an idea. It's related to manufacturing,
Okay,
so
can I
we
put a
should go.
correction in? It's
Sure.
22 million Canadians in 1974. So
Okay.
we have had a 50% increase in our population. If you compare that to any of those graphs that you've shown, Stephen, it is not a 50% increase in our economy.
There's the imports.
Okay, so you see imports, Stephen, if you look back to the far end of the graph, if you just scroll
Yes.
up just a moment for everyone to see, we can see we're looking at 40,000 as a figurative number. You can see the reference number on the other side is a 50%, is 50,000. So that's showing essentially a 20%, or sorry, 24, 22% rise in GDP. Our population has risen by more than 50% in the
Yeah.
same time
Yeah.
period. So effectively, our GDP has fallen per capita.
Yeah. Fair enough. And look at
Okay.
the imports. There was an increase of 2.1%, 50.9 billion. So right now we're basically in almost a 1.5 billion deficit.
Mm-hmm.
There's imports, metal, metallic minerals products rose 17.7%, a record high, led by wrought gold, silver, and platinum group metals and their alloys. Imports of consumers goods rose 4.8%.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on, is the import export too, because that's gonna be a spinoff from the manufacturing, Philip.
Yes.
So you're seeing more inputs of consumer goods,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the downsides of what's happening to the manufacturing. Right, there's going to be more dependency on imports.
Oh, exactly. And the dictates of, not even necessarily foreign nations, but just literally corporate heads of businesses that are not in the domestic supply chain. So I think the perfect example really was going back when there was the panic for mass development and different types of healthcare equipment in Canada. We really didn't have that capacity, and we were dependent on supplies from China, supplies from America, for a large amount of our really what were at the time being deemed essential national goods. and really strategic resources on a certain level. That's something that shouldn't be left without in the nation. There's a famous story in World War One of Canadian soldiers going to battle with the Ross rifle and wanting the Lee Enfield and being denied by Britain. And there was an entire domestic arms manufacturing enterprise that developed out of that in Canada so that we would never be without a domestic supply of essential goods. All of that was forgotten,
Exactly.
and so um, manufacturing is an essential tool, resource, and necessity of a nation, and it should
Of
always be
course. Yeah.
encouraged. Yes.
Yes. And here, this is related to it all, household debt to GDP for Canada. Keep in mind the GDP is overinflated as far as NCA is concerned. The reason it's overinflated is the central banks don't, you know, they're kind of protecting what they're doing, Philip, and the outcomes. They're trying to make it look better than it really is.
Hmm.
And that's the same with the CPI. CPI is undervalued, whereas GDP is overvalued. But here we got the household debt, and it's well over the GDP level. It's at 112,
Yes.
and this is quarter four to 20. This is the latest data I could get on this, but you can see the trend: more and more debt. But this is related to the manufacturing again. We're relying on imports, Philip.
Yes.
We're spending more. We're not producing, right?
Yes. You can only spend on your credit card for so long before you have to go to work.
So this is really troubling because this is at the base level of the consumer, right?
Mhm.
And they have more debt than the actual GDP.
Yes. It's it's wild how what I mean. You don't get a full insight because your neighbor isn't quite willing to disclose their economic situation. Um, but I mean, just looking around, how many of your neighbors have a new fence? How many have remade their garden? Um, been any new cars on your street this year or last year or in the last three? Those are the little details that you'll start to notice where the economy is being strained because the last place that you stop investing is your own home.
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
is related to consumer loans, mortgages, and I'm assuming credit card debt here, and it's only been growing.
Mhm.
And the household debt is 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 12% more than the total GDP for the country, Philip.
Yeah.
I don't have a number on the GDP, but we're looking over a trillion, right?
Hmm.
I would assume that, or close to a trillion.
Well, I'd assume. I mean, I think there'd be greater than a trillion in better years.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift to another document here that's relevant. That's going to just look a little bit deeper into this, but it's quite concerning, isn't it, Philip? That what we're seeing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think every day I kind of wake up with a bit of a nauseous sense in my stomach, just waiting to open the web browser to see what kind of dictates being pushed out today. Or
Yeah. So
it's
exactly. But you know, you're not going to hear this information in the mainstream news, are you?
no.
You're not going to hear it from those puppet politicians in Ottawa, are they? What you hear from them is, "Oh, let's get 100% manufacturing," right? Just something that's just complete asinine, ignorant statement or a manipulative statement, right?
Oh, yes.
Preying on people's ignorance, right?
It's
But
statements like that that led the Great Leap Forward in China.
this is
Yeah.
what we're dealing with. But this is a good document by the Canadian Manufacturing interest group. Like this group promotes Canadian manufacturing, praise on them. So we're going to share some of the report. It's like 5 years out of date, but it'll give you an idea of what's happening.
Okay.
So let's look into it here. This is a really interesting chart here, well, I'll just read the beginning here. Global manufacturing output is dominated by two countries, China and the United States. Together, they account for close to 42% of all manufactured goods produced around the world. I think that number's higher, Philip, because
Hmm.
this report's from 2016. So add on another 5 years, I would say it's close to 50% now. Japan and Germany are next largest, 7.1%, and 6.5% for global production,
Hmm.
respectively. But look at the
Okay.
trend here in this graph, and you see it's just declining. You see that, Philip?
Hmm.
You see
That's
that?
true. Yep.
And that's only to 2014. If this was updated, it'd be down here.
Hmm.
So the
Yeah.
country and NC has been saying this for so long that we're heading in the wrong direction, without question. Philip, the
Absolutely.
country is top down. It's run by these um, well, these puppet politicians are just on the stage, but there's organizations, businesses, individuals in the background who are pulling the strings. But we're heading in the wrong direction as a country, right?
Well, I
As a
mean,
whole.
at,
But
at, at its core, there's systemic policy of anti, basically economic opportunity for citizens in our country. You have a difficulty as a citizen. They talk about people having difficulty to vote. Talk about difficulty to start a business in Canada. You need to get a
yeah,
registration license. You have to figure out a tax number. You have to figure out issues with accountants. You have to have a separate tax account. It's a complicated way of how you split your incomes because your business is a separate entity, and you almost have to take a whole university course in order to really understand how the whole system works in order to even start your business. When you don't just want to open a business selling cakes, it's excessively burdensome, and it prevents many people from taking the opportunity and the leap into entrepreneurship. And that
yes,
takes so much opportunity of having that one person that maybe has that great idea that will never have the chance because they see it as a too daunting of a task.
yeah.
It's
So
just, yeah,
excellent point.
it's terrifying.
But I want to be clarified. In 2014, we had 1.5% of total production in terms of manufacturing, but I would conjecture that that's probably about 1% now, Philip, based on the trend down.
Yeah,
And
yes.
if we look here, this is manufacturing output by country. You see, China's way up there. The U.S., Japan, Germany, India is rising. So these numbers, keep in mind that they're going to be inflated.
Hmm.
And there's Canada there in 2014. But
The last couple of years would be enlightening if we could see some of those numbers.
yeah, well, I've got
Really.
some other data there, but and there's the decline here. Change in manufacturing employment, 1990 to 2014. Look at this, minus 20%,
Yes.
minus 20% in employment, and you hear these people saying, where so many Canadians have lost their jobs over this over these two decades.
Yes.
Look at that. Look at that.
Well, I mean, there's a little bit, and I think,
But look at the UK as well. UK has just been pummeled, eh?
well, as a society, I think we are a little bit to blame as well. I think we
Yeah.
all can really look back and think that there's been a view that manufacturing is dirty. Producing goods is a simple person's job, which is not true. In order to produce goods, it's incredibly labor intensive, it's incredibly technical, and really for a lot of the machines and equipment and
Mm-hmm.
observations, you need an engineering degree in advanced sciences in order to even know how it's working.
Yeah.
This is um, the revolutions of our nations, and some manufacturing is simple because there are essential goods and that's what we use every day, and other things are space age technologies that require precision equipment and precision workers in order to know what they're doing. And
Yes.
it's something that we haven't sponsored here very well. or recognized very well, including many of our schools have streams that they're, oh, the university stream, and there's, oh, those that aren't going to university, like they're lost or missing students. Where really some of these people going into the manufacturing, mechanical fields, carpentry and trades, they will be doing far better than our university students at the end of
Yeah,
the day.
look at this
Yeah.
here. The top manufacturing industries in Canada, 2015, food processing,
Yes, service.
way up there, motor vehicles and parts. But
Hmm.
realize we're losing them because look what happened in Oshawa. Like the plants closed down, right?
Yeah.
And petroleum refining, that industry is under attack, Philip.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of jobs. Just look at all the layoffs in Alberta. Chemicals, primary metals, machinery, fabricated metals, plastic, rubber products, paper products, wood products, right there, Philip, at the bottom.
Exports there. So
Yeah,
our
yeah.
plastics, and so
You see that,
um,
eh?
we produce raw exports, and we provide the production capacity to provide the essential goods for our nations for basic needs. So food, um, your car,
Yeah, but look at
pretty
this.
much those
Listen,
certain basics. Yeah.
so this is showing what I was saying. 2000 to 2000 it changes. You see the motor vehicle
Yes.
and parts, it's declining by
Yes.
significantly. That's over 40%. Computer electronics decline by over
Yes.
40%. Paper products, textiles. A lot of these companies were in Ontario.
Well, many of them have large decline.
Yeah,
Ford, I believe,
print,
announced the
print, print
cars.
related. But look
Yeah.
up here, food
Yeah.
products, right?
Yeah.
And then you got petroleum and coal products. Well, those are declining now, Philip. So
Well,
there's not much left here, is it? Look,
it aligns
these
with
are
policy,
all
though.
these. Yeah,
It aligns with policy. I mean, there's been the announcement
yeah,
that there's been an intention to remove petroleum-powered vehicles off the roads by the year 2035.
yeah,
And so, if you see a
exactly.
reduction in manufacturing, an increased cost of fuel, eventually you have an issue where it just becomes unaffordable that you stop buying vehicles.
Look at Ontario
So,
has
yeah,
almost 50% of it, but look at the decline. So Ontario's the most impacted by far.
yes. Well, that was
Follow,
Ontario was one of the
followed
largest
by
producers.
Quebec,
Yes,
followed by Quebec, and then Alberta.
yes. And Ontario was the industrial heartland of Canada for the longest time.
So these are all declining. The growth in manufacturing sales, there's a
Yeah.
decline there, but that's based on province there. So I think we got the gist of that report. Again, it's clarifying what's going on,
Hmm.
Philip. And what we're trying to do here at NCA is to empower the public with these facts, with this pertinent information, so they can make the best decisions. Because it's up to them ultimately, Philip. But our contention, as I said already, is that the trajectory of this country is absolutely in the wrong direction,
Yes.
right? And I'm going to dig a bit deeper into this. This is going to go into the manu. It's called the manufacturing sector gateway. This is out of the government of Canada, like, and this will probably give you a sense of why we're heading in the wrong direction. But let's get that document up here.
Go
Here it
ahead.
is.
All right.
Here it is, right here. So this is a government of Canada website. They're talking about the Well, the first statement is it's just not factual, Philip. They're saying manufacturing is a cornerstone of our modern economy, and it's in continuous decline, Philip. Counting for approximately 1.74 billion of our GDP, represents more than 12% of the total GDP, which is overvalued. But they don't tell you it's declining rapidly. What is more, manufactured export 354 billion a year. That could be a lot more. Canada's manufacturing has huge potential for Canada's economic future. Come on. All these Philip, I can't hear you.
I think we could promote as a policy
This is
that
unbelievable coming out of the government.
yes,
It's just not reality.
no, the
People,
encouragement should be the development of our own raw and mineral resources, timber resources, water resources, etc., in order to essentially provide added value to in order to sell them
no, but they're
on the
talking about
export
these.
market.
No, but they're talking about these new technologies. They're all in China, Taiwan, making them there.
Yes, yes.
Like, like what's what bureaucrat wrote that? Like, it's just not reality.
Oh yeah, I've seen. There were documentaries I was watching with my daughter last week, and it was about in Shenzhen in China, and part of the school program essentially had children building robots at the age of 4. And they were doing that in every year. Every single classroom was building robots, and there were 6 children that were basically branched off into their skill sets so they could be exceptional in their certain areas at a very young age and then receive additional general education in the afternoon. It was enlightening. And my gosh, there were people in back alleys able to assemble robots out of parts at a flea market and produce a walking robot that could do a task in an afternoon. We
Yeah,
couldn't do that in Canada.
exactly.
And
Philip, I want to be clear about something here.
yes,
Uh, and we're gonna get to the comments at the end, but you know, NCA is not going to force private companies to do manufacturing here, Philip.
yes,
And the reason a lot of these companies are in China, Taiwan, India, um, Singapore, Cambodia, etc., is because of the low wages, the minimal benefits, the minimal regulation.
yes,
Right. So this government statement here is just fluff. There's no substance behind it.
yes,
Um, these companies are trying to compete internationally. It's very competitive.
yes,
Uh, and the reason a lot of them are not here is because either they've been they haven't been able to sustain themselves. They've had to close shop, Philip, or
yes.
they had to move overseas.
Exactly. It became an
So
unwelcome and
that's the
unhealthy
reality of it.
environment. Yes, and it's just like yourself. If you were in a
But
home
this
that
is
was
but
uncomfortable, you would leave. Otherwise,
yeah,
people who are able to tolerate it or can establish a barrier for others for entry will stay. And I think that's
yeah,
what's happened in large sectors of our economy and manufacturing. Because really, if you look at even manufacturing as it is, the companies that are producing have multiple sites, multiple different divisions. It's not Larry's tire production. There's companies like Magna, which will have, I don't want to quote it, but there's probably over 50 to 80 different divisions at minimum within Canada producing multiple different products. We don't have small companies producing anymore basically on a larger scale where it's, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that would be the exception to the rule. Yeah.
yeah. But we're not faulting these companies.
No.
It's a competitive international market.
Yes.
How and then we get some of these parties, mandatory minimum wage, right? So how are
Yes.
you going to compete with people in China? Let's say they're making a dollar an hour, and you're going to pay your workers what, 15, 20, 30 dollars an hour, like,
Yes.
right?
Uh,
You just can't compete. Then you factor in all the benefits and etc. Right? So
And
this is the
yeah, but and
go ahead.
Stephen, looking at the last 2 years, we have to add all of the labor difficulties and difficulties of staffing. That is added. I don't even want to fathom what the cost is for manufacturing, but my guess would be at least 20 to 30% to all of their production costs, minimum,
Yeah.
minimum, and all the
So
testing requirements,
yes.
cleaning, etc. It
Yeah.
is increased the cost and delays for receiving materials, and productions and supply lines being shut down. It's created quite a bit of hardship in the supply lines. And I think that's where people are feeling it, where certain products are not available. You're trying to get an air conditioner and you can't get one, or you have to wait 6 weeks. It's simply because there's not the parts to produce enough air conditioners. And that's why you're seeing an
Interesting.
increase in production cost, or sorry, an increase in cost to the consumer as well, because, well, supply and demand.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and now this is related to it, and it's compounding it, Philip.
Hmm.
It's called outsourcing.
Yes.
So these are companies in Canada that are replacing Canadian workers with overseas workers, and that's what outsourcing is. Uh, and that's a severe impact on the Canadian worker, isn't it?
Yes.
So if we look at this chart, and this site here promotes it, like who's
Yeah.
funding them,
It's sight
right?
unseen too. It's something that, would be
So,
maybe a call center, or
but
that's the
but get
return
this,
center. Yeah.
get this. They say how outsourcing helps the Canadian economy, right? They're actually promoting it. They say it sustains business efficiency, right? And that's something we don't necessarily agree with, but what it's doing is allowing them to operate at lower costs,
Yes.
Philip.
Well, the
Uh,
difference is
but
those.
get this.
Yeah.
It says it helps a country to innovate.
Yes. Well, imagine if you're trying to
No, but
provide a
no, no,
short-term
but get this.
service.
Look. They're saying countries such as India and Philippines work on the latest technology innovation in different industry. Local companies can tap on these countries through outsourcing, so they can bring this technology to Canada. Basically, steal the technology from over there, right?
In theory, that's an
Yeah,
interesting statement, actually. But no, I mean,
yeah,
in a way, though, it would be like hiring a contract worker. You would have, say, maybe a term of 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it would be, and maybe your cost is, $30 an hour here. Well, if you can have a contract worker do the same job that would be a remote job anyway for $1.50 an hour abroad, and maybe the service standard would be equal, maybe better, or slightly worse, well, that would maybe be an acceptable standard. And
and here
so,
that yeah,
and that, yeah, so you have maybe call centers, I think would be a common one that we could think of. The others would maybe be warranty or accounting services, insurance processing. All of that could be done abroad. Heck, Stephen, even the medical system does this. I remember um, working in the hospitals, and overnight in certain hospitals, X-rays and CTs, etc., would be read overseas, and some of them were read in Israel and other European nations by radiologists there because people were asleep here. I thought that was an
yeah,
interesting scenario, but
yeah.
now there's computers that are processing those same radiology tests. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And look at this. They say, quote, it helps grow its network globally. Outsourcing is about tapping into global networks. When local business contracts a BPO company, they get to increase their network and market, which benefits both the Canadian foreign economy, but it doesn't help the Canadian worker. Come on, Philip, which is
Well,
integral to the Canadian economy. I understand that these companies want to, they have profit margins, so they have to stay competitive.
yes.
Um, but this is what's going on, and these are some of the companies that are engaged in it. The
Hmm.
CIBC Financial, the Royal Bank of Canada Financial, Slack, a software company, the Toronto Star, national
Hmm.
newspaper, Air
Yep.
Canada engages in it, Sun Life
Yep.
Financial Services, Scotiabank, TD Bank, Aldo,
Yes.
it's a clothing company. Those are only some that are
Oh, Stephen,
engaged in out.
can I go back to it? I mean, tacking on back to what I was saying earlier, though, where the difficulties in starting a business in Canada. If you today wanted to supply, say, call center services for a business that may or may not require 10 employees, let's say as an example, plus or minus 5 employees, maybe as low as 5 and as high as 15 over a course of a year, based on the trend of what you would require in contracts and services and what businesses you could acquire. In Canada, it would be difficult to start that type of business because it would be hard to hire, fire, and train 5 to 10 extra employees within a year. In other countries where labor rules are slightly, less onerous or um, stricter in regards to hiring and dismissal and short-term contracts, you could have a much easier time starting a business and providing a short-term service. So where they're saying there is some ability to provide variability, It's the fact that other nations and other regions that have different regulation and how to run businesses allow for that variability to provide a service at a cost-effective model.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we
Interesting.
are missing out on in Canada because of a burdensome regulatory system for business.
Interesting.
Yes.
And here's another example. Even the no, this is, oh yeah, this is CIBC showing it. Staff losing their jobs to workers in India. You see that?
Yes.
That was 130 CIBC finance jobs, Canadian finance jobs, and that was in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
You see that, Philip?
Yeah. And I believe there was actually an outcry of that because I believe those staff members that were being outsourced or dismissed were also asked, I believe, to train their call center replacements. I think that's what this, it might not be that specific one, but there was a banking outcry in that kind of timeline. Yeah.
And
Anyway,
here's some more
yeah.
data on the outsourcing that we should share. Um, so this is talking about outsourcing. I'm not sure the date of this article, but it claims here, Philip, that 1 in 25 Canadian workers lose their jobs due to outsourcing. That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And look at this Toronto-based bank. This might be the TD. They pulled in 1.4 billion in profit due to outsourcing. Right?
Wow.
They're saving money, but
Mm-hmm.
how's that the Canadian worker? Like, we're just going to be a shell country,
Exactly.
Philip. There's
Yes.
going to be no jobs here.
Yes.
Even the service jobs are leaving. Remember, we said Canada is basically service and resource?
Yes.
Well, we're losing all our service jobs.
Well, it's consolidating. That's really what's happening. We're consolidating into a limited number
But
of
look at this.
providers.
But even
Yes.
the federal government's in on it. Between 2011 and 2018, they outsourced 11.9 billion to IT consultants.
Mm-hmm.
That's wrong for the government to be doing that.
Yes. Well, it's
Why
what
aren't
were
they
they doing with that
promoting
fund? Yeah.
that those industries in Canada?
Mm-hmm.
I I don't understand it. This is why we're going in the wrong direction, Philip. You see all these pieces
Well, the trouble
that
is,
are
what was that money used for, and what were they promoting
doesn't matter,
abroad? It's
but those could
interesting.
have been
Yeah.
Canadians doing that job.
Oh yes,
So right
absolutely.
here, the outsourcing were makes up 71%, management consultants 24%, uh, IT service consultants were 71%, and temporary help services 5%.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Unbelievable.
I'm
The
part of it
very
too.
the yearly TAC for personal outsourcing has doubled 1 billion in 2011 to 2.2 in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, one issue, and I would blame provincial governments, not quite as much as federal
Look at
in
this.
this country, but they buy up land to to comparative for cost. If we look at in my province in Ontario, the provinces in the previous governments have bought up some real estate in the most expensive areas in Toronto. There's the Mars building is one down there, Six Kids Hospital, which I can't remember how many $1 billion were spent, but essentially there was a trade deal where there was a loan made to a development company that built the building, which was then supposed to then occupy and then rent from the government, who would then also
Right.
then lease it back to the government. It made no sense why we even had a third party involved. And now the building sits largely empty. It's a dinosaur, and it's built right in some of the most expensive real estate in our country. It could have been built, in Sudbury. It could have been built in
Right.
an hour north of Edmonton, but no, no. So it's interesting selection. So when they say, "Oh, it's cheaper to produce and outsource," again, is it really? It's interesting how they cost it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and look at this here. Canadian business and government will spend an estimated 15 billion on technology outsourcing. That's just technology outsourcing in 221, Philip.
Mm-hmm.
But remember the government, they were going on about the tech sector. You know, they're saying one thing on one page and then but the actions, it's all outsourced.
Yes.
So, where are the jobs? Well, this is what's happening. They're being outsourced. Our manufacturing is declining.
Yes.
We're basically a service resource sector, but the service sector is declining now because of outsourcing, Philip. We're
Yes.
basically just going to be a resource sector,
Yes. And of the
right?
clean and the
So,
unclean people who work in
yeah,
the select industries that are the clean and environmentally friendly and etc. Where manufacturing is dirty and industrial production and oil and all of these labor jobs like that. That's for other people. I think there's a level of snobbery in these policies as well. That's uh, it's
yeah.
contemptuous.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of offshoring of insurance services,
Yes.
and we saw that in the other data. Outsourcing by country. There's a lot of outsourcing from Canada to the U.S. and Mexico as well.
Hmm.
Um, India is the biggest outsourcing provider in the world. The U.S. is the biggest contractor, generating a mind-blown 84.2% of all outsourcing deals in the market.
Wow.
Wow, it's huge. And around 68% of U.S. consumer products companies are outsourcing. So it's happening in the U.S. as well, Philip.
Hmm. Yes.
So it's quite concerning. This is another real issue. What I find particularly troubling is when the government is doing it, Philip.
Hmm.
The government is supposed to have the best interests of the people at heart,
Yes.
yet yet they're outsourcing jobs that Canadians depend on. I don't understand it.
Yes.
Meanwhile, manufacturing's declining.
Yes.
So
There's the opposite. There's the interesting conundrum of how a tyrant can gain more authority and power through tyranny than through an open hand.
I got one more thing
Yeah.
I want to share today, but we're going to have to revisit this topic again. But this is out of the government, and it's quite mind blowing um, when I came across it. But this is again the government of Canada website, and they are literally using your tax dollars to encourage Canadian businesses to set up shop in China, i.e., manufacturing. Like, do you wonder why our manufacturing is in rapid decline, Philip?
Yeah. That's an interesting page. I haven't seen this one
So,
before, Stephen. Wow.
so they're
Yeah.
promoting, doing business in China. Basically, set it up there, manufacture your goods there.
Wow. Yeah.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
And they
Is
say,
there a parallel page for
but
Spain
the
and
but the
Portugal or?
government's never strayed, eh? The government's never strayed, but they say take your business to the next level.
Yeah, Stephen, just as an interest for the audience, is there a parallel page for, I just pick arbitrary countries like Portugal, Spain,
I didn't
Uruguay?
look.
Yeah.
I'm just focused on Canada.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
But I know I
but
just see it found
that's
China. Yes.
But this is why we're in trouble. This is why when I said we're headed in the wrong direction, it's coming right from the government and these crooks. I call them crooks in Ottawa. These these puppet politicians are a joke.
Well, Stephen, when they talk about representation, and there is the impression and the feeling that people are represented by our leaders who we vote for. I think a lot of times you always have to follow the money. And it is a simple one where you look into the maximum donations that an individual citizen can make. And I believe it is around $1,800 today is the maximum amount as an individual that you could donate to any political party. Um, if you are the state of China, if you are a large corporation like Pepsi, you do not have a limit on the amount of money that you can donate to certain politicians, political groups, or foundations. So your influence is so much larger than an average citizen, even a wealthy citizen. It's so disproportionate. And I think we have to look at the fact that potentially some of our politicians are serving those that pay the most.
Yeah. So I think yeah, fair enough, Philip. But this last document pretty much sums up what's going on. We got the government, which is supposed to serve the Canadian people, is what, serving these corporations and whoever else in the background. But
Yes.
we're very concerned at NCA. Where is this going, Philip?
Yes.
So I started this presentation. Some of these puppet politicians, and I'm being very sincere. I believe they are puppets, 100%. They're just a front for this establishment. But they're some of them were promoting 100% manufacturing, Philip,
Yes.
and we saw the data today. But that's so far from reality. But Philip, in order for us to get there, there's one path that you stated is that we would just impose it, but then our goods would be so expensive, we would isolate ourselves, and
Yes.
you know it would basically crumble, wouldn't it?
Oh, I mean,
We'd
and if
be
we stuck to our guns with it, that nothing else could be sourced from another production area. Well, when the water well wheel breaks in a northern Ontario or northern Alberta town and they no longer have water access, would we wait for a new water wheel to
Yeah,
be produced at a refinery once they get set up in another region eventually? So they would have no water until it happened?
exactly.
And that's the kind of crazy idea that was done. And like I said before, during the great leap forward in China, when up to 60 to 100 million Chinese people died due to government reorganizational policy of the economy.
Yeah. So
And
so another path to this 100% manufacturing, and this is the more likely path because the other one would be complete economic suicide, right? But this path would literally turn us in, basically China's 100% manufacturing, Philip.
mhm,
So it would literally turn us into a communist state. We would lose most of our benefits. Our wages would drop down to their level,
yes,
right? So maybe that's part of the reset, the Great Reset. I don't know. Let us know what you think. It is concerning. We didn't talk about this today, but with this 5G AI technology coming in, we're going to lose up to 40% of our jobs on top of everything we discussed today, Philip.
yes.
So that brings us to pity here. I want to show his comment. Hold on a sec here.
Yeah. What becomes of
Well,
that excess population? Raises a large question mark, doesn't it?
it does. But unfortunately, I can't put up his comment, but I'm going to read it out. Um, and they're actually blocking our comments now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the people out there. The comments aren't showing up, but pity was going on, Philip.
Okay.
He mentioned the fact that why are they bringing so many people in when we're losing our jobs?
Hmm.
Are they? So I would argue, are they trying to push us to this third world communist state?
Well, potential.
Something's got to give.
If you can bring there's a selection too of where certain individuals are brought in from in certain regard as well, or allowed to come into Canada. I think really policy should almost be looking at reunification of families regarding immigration more than we should be looking at building and having a newer labor force when we have a large
Yeah,
unemployed labor
yeah,
force
yeah,
here.
yeah. But
Um,
hold on a second here. Hold
yes,
on a second. We're losing our manufacturing. We're losing a lot of jobs for that. A lot
yes,
of jobs are being outsourced.
yes.
Yet they're bringing in more and more people to no jobs. So is the purpose a universal basic income? Like, how are these people going to survive?
So the greater people that talk about, I think the one world government and a United Nation management of the world and the removal of borders internationally um, would essentially see the importation of large groups of people from other nations to ours as part of a next step of that policy, where you would essentially um, increase our population, uh, decrease the overall effective wage, decrease the overall living standard in the nation by density of population and demand, such that basically your living standards and use of resources go down overall. Your birth rate will go down domestically. That's one issue they've done here. That you found that there's a higher birth rate of people who are first generation Canadians. That after 2 or 3 generations in Canada, those same Canadians have the same birth rate as other longer generational Canadians. It's not necessarily that you're from a certain place that you have more children. It's the economic conditions and hardship that you face after several conditions that eventually make it difficult to have kids. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what we're
So
facing here. So there is that reason why some people, there's the argument for adding to the labor force through importation of folks. However, uh, I think it's being skewed into population. What's it called? Like dissolving the voting strength in certain regions. So you can flood a population with certain voters that are added benefits specific to their needs in areas that are dense with political ridings. You can manipulate the voting scheme in the nation for generations to come.
yeah, but I want to look at the economy,
Okay,
Philip.
well, that is part of the economy,
Okay.
though.
No,
Yeah.
no, but no, but no, but listen, we're losing our manufacturing, which is a great source of jobs.
Yes.
We have more and more companies outsourcing, including the government.
Yes.
Okay, we're losing jobs there. Do you understand? This
Yes.
is huge.
Yes.
So, yet someone asked, and it's very pertinent. Why are they bringing all these people in when there's less and less jobs?
Well.
So, and then we factor in 5G and the AI.
Hmm.
We're going to lose up to 40% of our jobs. So, are they trying to create this dependent state of people?
I don't know.
Where
It,
are they trying to push down the wages over time? So the what are they up to?
so I mean,
Like,
there's the other argument, Stephen, and it gets a little bit conflicted in things, but they talk about the concept of population replacement, and this is something I'll just go back to ancient times rather than modern times. And the Romans did this. They would go into another nation that they conquered. Many of the say military age men could potentially be enslaved or executed or otherwise put to service, and then the children would be raised as Romans, and within a generation or two, it would become a Roman province, and it would be much more civil and amicable to the rulership of Rome. You can do the same thing in a nation through economic deprivation and through shifting populations by essentially replacing the population with a model that is more acceptable to the new terms of the new government. I don't want to speak for people from other nations, but those that have come to Canada from other nations may not be as quite as familiar with our policies and rules of law. And such a government can potentially walk over things and play on what would otherwise be, fears or age-old concepts of what government should be for people that aren't as familiar with how we're founded here.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. So
yes,
so 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 they're going to create a more compliant populace,
yes, and you erase our history
and
at the same time, so that
but
we,
also they're and then they can erase the history, but also manipulate that population because there's going to be less and less jobs. Let's face it.
yes, and now you're just a
And
place. No, so it's just a place. So if you're
so
just in
it's just
Canada, it doesn't matter whether you're in India or Canada or China
so
or
the
Germany. You're
so the
you're just in a physical spot. It's all in
so
the
the
world.
premise
Yeah.
premise of the government is the global economy, like Harper was pushing,
Hmm.
where these companies are working all over the world. So Canada itself will be just a shell, right?
Yeah. That's my fear. It's without
So
changes to
it
allow us to.
it won't exist as a viable country, right? It'll just have it's basically it's going to be network in all these other countries, right? Outsourcing, manufacturing,
Yes.
right? So what we have here, I would assume they're going to reduce the population down, but they're increasing it. Doesn't make sense, Philip.
Yes.
That's what I don't understand.
Yes.
Unless that ties in the universal basic income.
Yes. And more as a nation, as Canadians, we lack the common experience. I think the last time that we had a great national common experience was potentially the initiation of the war in Afghanistan. And I think that might not be a great example because that was a bit of a tragedy. I think for all parts involved, and everybody there, but
It was beyond a tragedy.
yes.
The money, the billions of dollars wasted,
Oh,
went into corrupt hands.
and I don't know how many people have
Billions,
passed away there. I don't know.
yeah, of course,
Yeah,
but also billions of our tax dollars ended up in corrupt hands,
exactly. And
and the whole thing failed.
yeah,
The Taliban are taking over the country as we speak.
and previously to that, our previous rallying basically national event was World War II, possibly Korea. Beyond that, I mean, I can't think of what you could say would be a
Oh,
large polarizing event that would have rallied the nation together to say, I am Canadian and this is what we are.
yeah,
And as a nation, we've been basically softened so that we're not acting, we're not protecting ourselves, we're not defending ourselves, we're going and seeking the help of others. And if someone's bullying you, well, you tell
yeah,
somebody and they help you. And the sense of person and self and person and establishment and ability to achieve is gone.
yeah. Look
And,
at this.
and yes.
Uh, I'm 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 very sorry to the viewers. It's not allowing me to show the comments as they come in, but 0% resource harvesting through proxy agents from foreign nations.
Hmm.
You know, I wouldn't rule that out,
It's true.
Philip.
Yes. Yeah. No. No, that's definitely what the
Yeah,
oh, no, I think there's one comment here that's just mentioned here. Pity pots. Most people who have immigrated to Canada have a better and more research than what the Canadian people have, and many come here because it's easier for them to create a small business. And I mean, in some degrees, I think that's true as well.
yeah, I think so
Yes,
too. Yeah,
and I think that, and I agree with you there in that regard. And I don't mean to single out any group as saying this group always does. I think that's a very wrong think. If you want to talk of wrong thinkism, but I think if just this is just my conceptualism, thinking what possibilities are, and I think I'm including regular, not regular, but people who were here previous to greater than 10 years. Okay, but it's true. And I mean, if you do read the policies on how things are done, you will have a greater advantage. And there is a requirement, I think, if you follow through in what is the normal immigration process where you apply and you have a citizen process, there's a test, you're approved. I think those folks have gone through an onerous task to become Canadians. And there really is a lot of research that is not a test that's required for people who are born here, or so it is in a way it gives them a greater leg up. But we also have to look at there are some policies that do specifically benefit some groups. Our government touts not being a racist country. However, there are some groups that do have benefits through policy for access to funds that others do not. And in that regard, there are some supports for certain groups that do get small leg ups that other groups do not. And it doesn't mean
of course.
specifically immigrant populations, could be other longer standing populations. But that is one that there is a disproportionate opportunity where not all Canadians, even if they go to the same school, the same university, the same degree, will they have the same opportunity at a job? And it's not because of what they say or how they speak or whatever. It's how they look, and
Yeah,
that can distinguish things in
yeah.
Canada. So
But
yeah.
yeah, but hold on a sec. The important point today is that we're losing jobs. There's more and more through outsourcing, declining manufacturing, through the AI
Hmm.
technocracy that's coming. There's a projection we're going to lose up to 40% of our jobs. So the question I beg to ask is, why do we need all these new people when we're going to be losing, up to 50% plus of our jobs? It doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
And the only thing I can say to our audience is universal basic income, the great reset. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yes, and then you have a
That they
pool of human resource labor to draw upon when needed
cheap labor,
for
cheap labor.
something. For something.
That's totally dependent on the government.
Yes. In the past, when you have large pools of cheap labor, they're either used for massive national farms, industrial products, industrial or basically products to produce infrastructure like large roads across nations, or war. That's the other reason
Yeah.
that what you do with excess populations, use it for war.
Yeah. So we're going to have
Yeah,
to monitor the situation. It's quite concerning. We laid out pretty much the data on the manufacturing. It gives everyone a good sense. Thank you for your comments. We're going to have to revisit this, Philip,
for sure.
but I think everyone should be concerned after hearing this information, Philip. They should be very concerned
Hmm.
at where the country's at, where it's going. I'd be very worried for future generations with what's going on. What are their prospects for survival?
Yes.
What kind of country will they be living in 10, 20, 30, 50 years? Very concerning, Philip.
Yes.
And so this isn't anything to do with immigrant versus non-immigrant. It has nothing to do with that. It's beyond that, Philip.
Hmm.
We're looking at the basic economic realities of what's going on. We're saying it makes no sense whatsoever from the standpoint of the well-being of the Canadian people. That's where we're coming from.
Yeah. No.
But maybe if you're from a globalist corporation, you're part of the cabal establishment.
Yes.
It's great because you're eliminating all the resistance and you're creating a compliant population, right?
Yes. And
With excess labor, and you can do what you want. You can
yes.
implement your universal basic income and have more slave labor.
Yes, and and that's it's really coming back to the sense that we be going back to the 16th and 18th century model of mercantilism, and that's really where they promoted a governmental regulation of a nation's economy for the purpose of augmenting state power, and it's at the expense of a rival nation's power. So what you would do in a nation through economic warfare is you would basically promote through lobbying and stimulation businesses as well as governors that would create positive policy for your nation so you can infiltrate more and expand and influence in order to eventually that you're ruling the nation by proxy through its economy. And once you rule that way, it's total. And you have the benefit of having a nation that's hands
Mm,
free, that can be ruled separately, and you don't have the responsibility for whatever is done there. I mean,
yeah,
this is done time and time and time over history. We could find these examples. What one example that we would have learned, and again in high school, are the American colonies and Britain, and they were say in the pattern of bringing cotton to Africa and Britain, and then bringing slaves and luxury goods back to the colonies, and the colonists paying a higher amount of goods off to Britain for their luxury goods than they would have been say earning off of their cotton in basic sense, and it was a way to take advantage of another nation, and people eventually felt so disenfranchised that they rebelled. Well,
yeah, interesting.
right? And I mean, what's happening here?
Yeah. I just want to look at this comment by Petey. He said the government is forcing us to lower wages with higher cost of living. Well, inflation is up because of all the extreme monetary policy. So we're looking at by the end of the year close to 9% inflation, Philip.
Wow.
So that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt a lot of people.
Hmm.
They're talking lower wages. Well, one thing we know, we have stagnant wages. It's
Hmm.
been this way for 40, 50 years, Philip.
Yes.
So there may be a push down on the wages eventually.
Hmm.
And then 0% is talking about set up a shell corporation overseas, employ Canadians in Canada. Do it looks like it's outsourced. Would that work? Well, the reality of it, 0%. China has companies, Philip,
Yes.
through the FIFA agreement under the Harper regime, and they're hiring Chinese
Yeah.
workers in our own country, and they're not a shell corporation,
Well, I heard an interesting argument
right?
regarding this
So
mandates that have been spoken of, and one argument was for a fellow that said, "Well, if people don't comply with the mandate, they'll be potentially, they'll lose their job or be replaced with another worker, or not replaced at all. If a nation has an economic crisis, one of the first things they do is they cut their national and provincial workforces in order to essentially stabilize the economy, because they can't afford to pay labor to a certain extent. Well, if they announced a 5% reduction in federal and provincial workers, say across the board, let's just pick an arbitrary number, or 2%, that'd be thousands and thousands of people that would be without their jobs. And people would lose their minds. They're saying, oh my gosh, how could you cut 5% of workers? But through a mandate, they achieve the same goal, right? And so there's different ways that policies, though they're presented in one direction, they can be achieving an economic goal or an economic necessity goal that may or not be fully disclosed to the nation.
Yeah, I would say I just want to talk about solution just briefly, Philip.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it rests on the Canadian people ultimately, but you can't have the government that's supposed to be in service of you working against you. And that's
Yes.
what we've had in the country for decades and decades.
Yes.
So, our position at NCA, we have to address that fundamental um, disconnect right now in the country, and it starts with the central bank and the central banking cartel.
Yes.
That's the reality of it. Unless we address those issues, everything else is falls well short, Philip.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's what we're telling people. So uh, you know, the central bank is the most powerful entity in the country. Let's face it, right? They control the money supply,
Everything. Everything.
right? So,
Yes.
and the banks, all these banks are tied into it, and they're getting all kinds of benefit from it. But they're considered essential. But what about the Canadian people, Philip?
Yes. Yeah. I'm
You
sorry,
know,
Stephen. I had my daughter
we're
speaking to me there for just a moment.
yeah,
Sorry.
but that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
The solution, this has been going on too long. I don't know what's going to happen, Philip, but at
I,
least we're discussing it, right? So,
I think as a
uh,
party, the thing that we could say that we can promise people is we would make every effort to try to bring down or essentially reformat certain regulations that would be an establishment that essentially are anti-business and are preventing people from having opportunities to succeed or take the opportunity to leap into entrepreneurship. And I think that's one of the biggest things, as well as having systems where certain regulations can't be thrown at businesses as barriers to opportunity, such that it's you want to expand or go beyond, let's say, 100 laborers, where many of our regulations are set on that there's 50 laborers or 100 laborers. Maybe those numbers need to be looked at as well. There's a certain window and sort of glass ceiling where businesses are allowed to operate and expand a certain level before they start facing the effective eye of the state and overregulation that essentially prevents them from going to that level.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I,
one aspect. But we got to focus on the Canadian people as a whole and what's
yes.
happening to them. They're being attacked on almost all fronts now, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, the future is very bleak. For a lot of people, how are they going to make ends meet? They're already heavily in debt, Philip.
The hard part is
Uh,
it's
the,
trust. Is how do you trust when everything is in question?
so the
Yeah.
government is heavily in debt. This
Hmm.
is just reality of it. They're going to have to increase taxes,
Yes.
reduce government services and benefits. So this is reality we're dealing with. Share your comments. We're going to have to redress this, but I want to thank everyone for joining in. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
I thought it was a constructive dialogue today.
Yes.
A very pertinent information pertaining to all Canadians, and also people in other countries, because we're sure similar situation is occurring in your country as well, and hopefully you benefit from this. And we will revisit this very soon. I
Hmm.
want to wish everyone a great weekend, and thank you for joining us today.
Yes. Yes. 'Cause I believe other nations, Australia, the UK, France, have all been experiencing